Hello, Xavier. Thank you for being here. I was thinking about how to introduce you. I would like to say that you are a great linguist, a speaker of several Romance languages, but also an author of several children books. Am I right or am I mistaken? Would you like to add something?
No, you're completely right. I'm a linguist. As I usually say, linguistics is my job, but literature is my passion because I love writing, especially for children and teenagers, and that's what I do most of my time when I can. And thank you for being invited here by you, because it's a pleasure to share this time with a person like you, whom I admire, because you are also a great speaker of languages. You also teach them and you prepare teaching materials, which is also something complicated, really complicated, but it's fantastic.
Thank you, thank you. Let's go straight to our topic today, which is Galician. Galician as a small minority language, if I'm correct, of the Iberian Peninsula. Would you be so kind and introduce this language to people, to somebody who might not know anything about this language and who perhaps hears for the first time about Galician?
Yes, Galician is closely related to Portuguese, so that the mutual understanding between Galician and Portuguese, and I'm now referring to European Portuguese, is higher than 90%. So the question is, are both two separated languages? So from a political point of view, they are, because one spoken in Spain and the other one spoken in Portugal. However, if you take it from a philologic point of view, things are not so clear. So for some people, they are still one language. In the Middle Ages, obviously, they were just one language, which was known as Galician Portuguese. But today, it's a debate, it's an open debate, because for some people, it is politically necessary that Galician is considered just one language independent from Portuguese, and from others, they're both the same, which involves that Galician is spoken by more than a quarter of a million of, no, it's 250,000 million speakers in the world, including obviously Brazil. So it's up to you to take any of both optics or point of views. And as for where Galician is spoken, it is obviously spoken in Spain, in Galicia, in the so-called region of Galicia. Galicia is in the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula, as you just said, and also in the neighboring regions of Asturias and Castilla y León, and also a little area in another Spanish region, Extremadura, in 3 little villages. My own family comes from the Asturias area, where it is politically considered a different language. You remember what Roman said, divide et impera. So for those who are against our languages, you divide them, so they become more and more languages, and your enemies are smaller. Unfortunately, we're also speaking about politics when we are speaking about languages. However, Galician is a language that is threatened because it's losing speakers at a high speed. The generational transmission is really low, and we are, or personally, I'm very, very pessimistic, because I think that in 50, 60, 70 years, Galician will be dead as a language.
You think so?
Yes, but not only Galician, most minority languages in Europe, including Catalan, which is probably the most powerful.
Where can be Galician studied at the university in Spain? Only in Santiago, or are there some other places where it can be studied?
Well, studies of Galician at university level, there are more universities in Galicia apart from Santiago. There's also Coruña, there's also Vigo, and in Spain there's a position in Galician, for example, the University of Barcelona, And I personally, I work at university whose site is in Madrid. I'm officially a lecturer of Galician Portuguese philology. So more or less five universities offer Galician studies, but not specifically as students who want to follow Galician language and literature studies can also do so in some other universities. For example, the Complutense University in Madrid also has a lectorate of Galician, and the Galician government has a set of Galician lecturers all over the world. For example, apart from other Spanish universities, like as I just mentioned, the Complutense in Madrid, Cáceres, I think Granada, but also abroad, for example, in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, a couple of them in Germany, if I'm not wrong. One is in Leipzig, the other one is in Berlin. There's some others, I think in Italy and in France, it's United Kingdom. I can't remember exactly the places where these lectures are, but there are several ones.
Okay, thank you. But you said that the number of speakers is rapidly decreasing. What are the main reasons?
That's complicated to explain, but on the one hand, there is a stretching idea that non-state languages are useless. So when you learn or you see a speaker of a language like Galician, and you think it's useless to speak outside your own territory, people tend to think, why speak Galician? Why to try to improve my Galician if I can communicate in Spanish, which is an international language? That's one of the main reasons I find. But on the other hand, the persecution against this language all over history, even from the 16th century, has been continuous, so that the imposition of Spanish in our case has been constant. So, for example, there's a figure which is referred to as self-hatred, so that speakers hate their own language because they consider it inferior. But this feeling is not exclusive of Galician. It can be found everywhere. For example, you can find something similar in Sardinian, where you travel to the island of Sardinia and speak to their people, their speakers. They feel more or less the same. Sardinia is inferior, so they don't transmit it to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And also already in the 20th century, because of schooling, the spreading of schooling, the communication between parents and children in their native tongue has been cut off, so that they transmitted the official language of the country. That's everywhere in Europe and also in South America, because I have been in contact, for example, with the Quechan communities in Ecuador, and there are already parents who speak in Spanish with their children, not in Quechua, but in Spanish. Mm-hmm. So the next generation has lost the language. Mm-hmm. So there are multiple reasons, which not only Galician, but all minority languages.
But are there any steps that can be done, that should be done to preserve this language? Are there any possibilities?
Well, people have been discussing on this topic for very long. It's not easy, but there's at least one case in which there's a certain success, which is Basque. The loss of native speaker has been replaced by what is called the figure of new speakers, people who take conscience that they belong to a linguistic community, so that start using the language of their parents and grandparents and so on. As for Galician had a rather comfortable situation 10 years ago, when 50% of school subjects were taught in Galician, minimal 50%. They could reach up to 90% depending on the school. But the present government, autonomous government, has ruled that only 33%, and it has marked the subject that can be taught in Galician. For example, if the government rules that mathematics must be taught only in Spanish, there's a teacher who teaches English and mathematics, he'll be punished, right? And so they said 33% of Galician, 33% of Spanish, and 33% of English. The point is that that's what the law says, but nobody teaches in English. So that the remaining 33%, instead of being taught in English, is usually taught in Spanish. So the presence of Galician school system is diminishing, so that there's already now in this year, there's been a study that states this phenomenon that 50% of students under 15 years old, 15%, 50 years old, don't speak a word of Galician, despite they taught 30% of the curriculum in Galician. So the point is that the Galician government is a wall, and actually we know it's against the growth of Galician, the development, and all the possibilities that the language had. Fortunately, there's been a very good news the last days, and it's been that the Galician Parliament has approved the creation of a children's TV channel, 24 hours of children TV programs in Galician. We expect, we hope this will be a good, I don't know how to say, they will improve the situation of the language. It will encourage children to keep using Galician, because apart from school, there are very few options for children to have a life in Galician. Many people who usually speak to each other in Galician do so in informal situations, but officially it's much more complicated, despite having an incredible literature, because literature in Galician is really good. So let's hope that the creation of this new TV channel will suppose that children can watch good contents in Galician.
Xavier, please tell me, what is your personal relationship to Galician? What is what is so great about this language, so that you study it, describe it, and yeah, you support it? I can tell. So can you give us some personal hints, like what is so great about Galician?
Well, Galician, and this is the main reason for me, Galician is my mother's language, not my father's, because my father's language was Castilian, like mine. So my native language, my first language was Spanish, but my mother's language was Galician. So her whole family spoke Galician, and I must say I fell in love with this language when I was a teenager. I've had heard Galician everywhere because, you know, the ambience, my family, etc. The little hamlet where my mother was born. So when I was a boy and visited it, I heard it everywhere, but I didn't speak it because I hadn't been transmitted Galician, unfortunately. But there was a moment in my life when I fell in love with this language, so that I began to use it actively. So in fact, I'm one of those people I mentioned before. I'm a new speaker, a person who wasn't brought up in Galician, but who actively uses it everywhere. Obviously, not where I live now, in the center of Spain, because here everybody speaks Spanish. But when I am with my friends and I visit Galicia or Asturias, I speak Galician everywhere, in all situations. And so that when I was, as I said, when I was a teenager, I fell in love and I began to write in Galician. Now that I write for children, I must confess that the first version of eventually most of my texts are in Galician, and I self-translate into Spanish later. But I feel much more creative when I use Galician. I feel much more comfortable. I feel that I can express myself much better in Galician than in any other language. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say magic, but it's in my core, in my heart, in my mind, so that the expression in Galician is something spontaneous to me. It doesn't mean I can't write in Spanish. Of course, I can write perfectly, but it's something that touches my soul. So that's why I use Galician as my first way to express, and then I self-translate, which is easier.
Okay, thank you. Well, back to linguistics. Well, I think that many people here in the Czech Republic who study Spanish, well, I think that a lot of them, they actually do not know so much about the complex linguistic situation in Spain, which is really a surprise for some of them, that there are actually so many languages or dialects, some of them spoken. Can you explain this situation in a few sentences, if it's even possible, for somebody who is really not who does not have this information about the number of the languages, about their basic relations among them? So how many languages are there actually on the Iberian Peninsula?
All right. All languages spoken in the Iberian Peninsula are Romance. That means they come from Latin, except for one, Basque. Basque is a remote language that existed in the peninsula, in the Iberian Peninsula, some 5,000 years ago. So before the arrival of these so-called Indo-European folks coming from Central Russia, more or less, or even it's not know exactly where they come from. But after, before their arrival, obviously there were many other languages in Europe that disappeared. One of the exceptions is Basque, as well as Hungarian and Finnish, the Finno-Hungarian group, linguistic group, right? So these are the only two remaining groups of languages from the oldest Europe, right? So Basque is one of them. It was spoken in a large area on both sides of Spain and Portugal. Sorry, not Portugal, France and Spain. Current Gascogne in France was Basque speaking, and a large area reaching the Ebro River in Spain was also Basque speaking. So its territory was enormous, and some related languages were spoken in all the north of the Iberian Peninsula. That's the first one. And then as for the rest, obviously from west into east, Galician and Portuguese, you take it just as one or two, depends. And then there is what we call a dialect system. We're not mentioning or imagining as a language, but a set of varieties that is called, this one is called Asturian Leonese, where Asturian is the most important and I'd say language, but not from specifically a linguistic point of view. It's a language as a spoken variety. So one of the languages is Asturian, spoken in the very north of Spain, Asturias. And there is a variety even spoken inside Portugal that is known under the name of Mirandese, Mirandês in Portuguese. So this is another linguistic group that in the Middle Ages reached almost the Andalusia, almost. So the whole west of Spain, apart from Galician Portuguese, had one language that time known as Leonese, because there was the kingdom of Leon. Right, then the next group is Spanish, Castilian Spanish, which is currently the official language in the whole country. Then into the east, there's still Aragonese, which belongs to the region known as Aragon. Aragonese is also in a critical situation, the same like Asturias. Yeah, they hardly have speakers, living speakers, I mean. And then there is Catalan. Catalan has a very peculiar situation because it's spoken in 4 states, 4, mainly in Spain, in the regions of Catalonia, Valencia, and the Balearic Islands. But also there is a state, an independent state, where the official language, Andorra. So in Andorra, the only official language is Catalan, and Andorra is neither Spain nor France. It's independent, theoretically. Then the south of France, binding to Spain, whose capital city is Perpignan. That's also a traditional Catalan-speaking area. And finally, the island of Sardinia in Italy, there's a city called Alghero, where Catalan was, because it still is in some way, but traditionally was the traditional language of that city. So the people still speak a little Catalan over there, right? So in 4 states, as I said. But that's not all. In a corner in northwest of Catalonia, there's another language, which is Occitan. Occitan, like in France, but it is a variety of Gascon. Gascon in this area is known as Aranese. There's still a few thousand speakers over there, and this is really interesting, Aranese and Catalan are co-official in the whole Catalonia together with Spanish. So despite that Aranese is spoken just there, it's co-official in the rest of Catalonia. So theoretically, you could address the regional administration in Aranese. Well, and these are the living languages. Historically, there was still something called Mozarabic. It was the Romance languages spoken under the Arabic power in the Middle Ages, but they disappeared. And if you jump into Africa, you know, there are 2 enclaves in North Africa, in Morocco, Ceuta and Melilla. In these towns, people, apart from Spanish, also speak Berber, Tamazight, and also Moroccan Arabic. They are not taught at school. And there's something also, let me finish with this. There are some areas along the border between Spain and Portugal where the language is not Spanish, but Portuguese. Because in the first times, these places belonged to Portugal, but there was a change in of the borders, and these places passed to Spain. So Portuguese is also spoken in Spain. I'm not referring to Galician, but specifically to Portuguese. However, the situation of Portuguese in these areas is horrible also, the same like the so-called minority languages, because Portuguese in Spain has automatically become a lesser used language. And that's the situation of Spain.
It's somehow complicated.
A lot.
Okay. Well, apart from those 4 official languages in Spain, which one of the other of languages varieties is, in your point of view, the most studied, or I mean, like the strangers, we, for example, here in the Czech Republic, which of those languages which are not official are we interested in the most? If you can understand me.
Yes. Obviously, it is Catalan. Catalan is the most studied language from outside Spain. For example, there in Prague, there is a lectorate, as you know, whose responsible is Andreu Bausá, a great friend of mine. And he has students of Catalan year after year. It is very successful. People are really interested in Catalan. But a few years ago, there was also a new position open to Catalan at Brno University, which was amazing, no? Because everywhere people are interested in learning Catalan. There are a lot of universities having places to study Catalan. I can't remember exactly where, but the same way as I said, there are lectures lectures of Catalan, of Galician, in some places in Europe. There are many more of Catalan. So even in the States,
somehow it's a question of money too, because the Catalan government invest a lot in you know what I mean, in they support the Catalan studies. So somehow maybe it would be a way for Galician too to spread along like in Europe, but it's also a money question, isn't it?
Well, that's partially right. Probably the Galician government has invested so much money as the Catalan has. But as for Catalan, there are 4 governments involved, not only the Catalan one, but also the Valencian and the Balearic, but also the Andorran, which is an independent government. It's not a regional government, it's states. And actually, the electorate of Prague belongs to the Andorran government, not to the Catalan one. Yeah. So the politics is completely different. The situation of the lectures is also different. But that's one thing. Investment, yes, but also the number of speakers. Galician is considered to have 2.5 million, more or less, and as for Catalan, they're more or less 10 million. So I think that it also has some influence on the interest of the language. Mm-hmm. Tourism, for example, hundreds of Czech tourists come to Catalonia, spend their holidays there, but they don't to Galicia, because first of all, because the climate is different, the interest is different. It's not so sunny. Galician climate is much similar to, I don't know, climate existing in France or in Normandy, in Central Europe. It is very green, but it's also very rainy. Instead, the climate in Catalonia is typically Mediterranean. So if you want to spend a few days under the sun and be tan and so on, you choose obviously the Mediterranean. So that includes also the language. And Czech people are also very curious about what other languages. I've met Czechs who know very exotic languages, like, for example, let me say, Shuar in Ecuador, which is an Amazonian language. I met a Czech who was enthusiastic about the language of this. So you Czechs are very interesting people, and try to learn from it around you. And congratulations, because I wish Spaniards were the same. But we have, as you said, a very rich panorama of languages in our country, and 95% of speakers of people in Spain can just speak Spanish. They are not interested in any other language, not including their own. So it's a pity.
Well, I have a personal question. I've been several times to Galicia and to Santiago, and I just loved it, as many other people. But I really had this strong feeling of the Celtic, I don't know how to call it, some Celtic influence, like the music, well, the stone crosses, the churches. Well, and I think it's the only place in Spain where this can be found. Maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know. Please correct me. But can you explain that somehow? Or
well, this is a topic under discussion, as well as the relationship between Galician and Portuguese. Obviously, the cults were in Galicia, but not only. One of our typical musical instruments, a pipe, exists in other parts of Spain. It exists also in Asturias. Both the Galician and the Asturian bagpipes are different. They sound different. They've got in common that there is, for example, in the islands, Scotland, and so on. But even there, these bagpipes are different. So this is taken as one of the tokens of the Celtic culture. But if you take it, for example, from the linguistic point of view, there are very few signs, very few loanwords from that having a Celtic origin. For example, French itself has many other words coming from Celtic languages. Actually, Gaulish was also Celtic language, and so the influence of Gaulish upon French is evident, but not so on Galician and Portuguese. Of course, there are words. For example, I'm just remembering the oak tree. The oak tree is in Spanish is roble, which is a typical Latin word. Instead, in Galician and Portuguese, it is carvalho. Carvalho is clearly Celtic. However, You mentioned the architecture, but I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say, because the use of stones is common to the whole west area, and their places, for example, in North Portugal. And if you don't know you're in Portugal, you'd say I'm in Galicia, because the popular architecture is completely the same, right? But other things that I think are important to consider a culture, to be Celtic or not, are not present. Obviously, the language, the Celtic language, was not only spoken over there. The Celtic language was reached even the center of the peninsula, and in some areas they mix up with the other pre-Roman folk, the Iberians themselves, and the Iberian Peninsula comes from them. So there was a kind of hybrid folks all over the center of the Iberian Peninsula. So it is commonly said that Celtic culture in Spain reached a third of the current territory, not exclusively Galicia. Place names, which could be also a manifestation of this presence, are very scarce, even in Galicia. In Galicia, which is incredible, what you find most are Germanic origin place names and family names, also in North Portugal, because after the fall of the Roman Empire, there was a kingdom, the Swabian kingdom. Swabian, remember, this has to be with Schwab in German, so you can figure out where they came from. So the Swabians created a kingdom in the current region of Galicia and surroundings, also including North Portugal and Asturias and so on. And the Germanic print here is much deeper than any virtual Celtic print we can find everywhere in Galicia and other areas of Spain. Okay. So, of course, there is a Celtic presence, but it's not up to the point to say that Galicia is a Celtic nation. But politically, and everything's policy in this word, politically, Galician has been included, as well as Asturias, in this so-called group of Celtic nations, which include Brittany, include Wales, Ireland, and Scotland. But in these countries, some Celtic languages are still spoken, however, not in Galicia or Asturias.
Okay, thank you. My last question, please, Xavier. Imagine me as a person who is thinking about learning Galician, somebody who would like to start to learn this language. Maybe I do know Spanish or Portuguese, but maybe I don't. What would you recommend me? Where should I start? Are there any YouTube channels, for example, that you personally like and you follow, or some radio stations that can be recommended? Whatever. It's a very wide question. So and I would be really happy for some personal tips of materials that you like, that you follow, listen to, watch, whatever.
Well, that's a very complicated question. Well, let me start by saying that a lot of Brazilians are now really interested in Galician, because they find it so incredibly similar that they realize that's a variety of their own language. Brazilians, not even Portuguese, because the distance between European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese to Galician is larger. However, they just need to study a little grammar, a little vocabulary, as you said, follow a few YouTube videos and so on, so they can catch up with Galician in just a few weeks. And it's very funny because they keep speaking Galician with their typical Brazilian accent, which is fantastic. If you're a speaker of Portuguese, there's no problem. because as I said before, more than 90% of both languages are mutually understandable. So there are false friends, but anyway, no need to follow special studies, just listen to the language, reading, etc. If you're speaking of Spanish, you will probably understand more than 60% of the language, which means that one calls you a large effort to learn the language. As for the grammar, you'll find some very interesting things that don't exist in Spanish. The movement of the clitics. For example, you say in Spanish, we place the clitics always in the same place before the verb, except as for the infinitive. But you say, me dijo, creo que me dijo, but instead in Galician, it depends, because the first one you say, díxome, but in the second case is creo que me dijo. So in this case, it's before the verb. So this kind of situations are really interesting, coincide with European Portuguese. As a lexicon regarding everyday life is much more similar than Portuguese, because there's the enormous influence of Spanish. And obviously you need to study a little, because some grammar is always necessary, but in this case, it is also it's a must. And that sees the mutual understanding is so hard. I know people who have learned Galician basically by reading. And as I said before, Galician has a very, very good literature. Since the 19th century, they are they're incredible authors who write about modern topics, who create first-class literature, and people who are interested in this kind of books usually can learn the language just by reading and having a dictionary by you. So that's a way. As for videos are fantastic. Radio, there are not so many radio stations. There's a TV channel that can be switched on the internet. That is the Galician television. However, and I must say that people who work on television have a very not desirable model. They are not a desirable model of Galician, because most of them are Spanish speakers who read or interpret in Galician. So that's a pity, because the linguistic model is rather it's horrible, to say any other thing. I don't like it. So it's quite different to listen to these people than listen to people on the road, people on the streets, people in the villages with whom you communicate in quite another way. Their phonetics is spontaneous, is good. However, these people working on TV have Spanish phonetics and read in Galician. That's one of the main complaints about the Galician television, and probably it's in most cases it's the same as for radio station. So you want to find videos, internet videos, online videos where people speak Galician. You should choose those having native speakers of Galician. So that's probably nothing to do with official channels, as I said before, because they're Spanish speakers using Galician. However, I remember having found a few ones where normal people say things about Galician or in Galician, and the quality of their phonetical system is good. And that's important. You choose good models, because otherwise you speak Galician like Spanish, and when you go to Portugal and try to speak Galician, because Galician is rather useful in Portugal, they automatically pass to Spanish, because they hear Spanish. They don't hear something similar to theirs. They hear Spanish. And Portuguese have a kind of automatic control that make them speak Spanish when somebody approaches and has Spanish accent. Let me tell you just anecdote, personal anecdote. Many times when I travel to Portugal and speak with people, etc., we're talking in Portuguese, and at least for 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour, we're talking Portuguese. Then they ask me what's my name and where I come from, and it's in Spanish, and they automatically pass or try to pass in Spanish. So this is very sad because I'm in their country. You know, Spaniards don't speak Portuguese, so they just come along one speaks Portuguese, and they have to speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
This is very colonialist mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However,
it's somehow so strange in their minds that they adapt very quickly on the information and they switch to which is not very natural, but I can understand that it happens. Okay.
yeah, but for example, with my wife Natasha, we usually speak to each other, sometimes in Czech, but most of the times in Italian. So they hear us speaking Italian, and they address us in Spanish, because the world is divided into Portuguese-speaking people and Spanish-speaking people. So whoever doesn't speak Portuguese speaks Spanish.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are at the end. Is there something I should have asked and I didn't ask? Something that you would like to mention, or something that we forgot, something important that we forgot to say about Galician? Is there something like that?
I'd be speaking about Galician for hours and hours and hours. Could be speaking about its literature, many things. Actually, I'm not Galician. I wasn't born in Galicia. I was born in Castilla. But as Fernando Pessoa, the Portuguese author says, he says in Portuguese, a minha pátria é a língua portuguesa. So I feel the same with Galician, and I say, a minha pátria é a língua galega. So Galician for me is my homeland, and I have it inside me. And wherever I use it, I'm making my homeland. And I use it everywhere I can, not only in Galicia. But for example, when I spend time in Ecuador, in South America, and I haven't spoken Galician for a time, I take my phone, ring someone and say, falemos galego, because I need it. As I said before, it's something within me, in not only my heart, in my brain, in my core, it's a part of my soul. So I need to listen to Galician when I haven't spoken it for a time. So it's difficult to explain, but for me, it's like this. It's more than a language. Galician is a part of me.
This is a beautiful end. I think it's a great end to this interview. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, for sharing with us all this useful information. I'm looking forward to seeing you maybe in some other interview, if I can hope, and if you are willing to. And thank you very much.
Děkuju. Omlouvám se, protože jsem nemluvil česky, ale prostě asi budu mluvit česky. Tentokrát ne, protože to je moc těžký jazyk a ještě nemluvím dobře, ale prostě doufám, že budu mluvit i všechno česky. Tak jo.
Ještě.
Nashledanou, uvidíme se.
Měj se krásně, ahoj.
Ahoj.